All right. Well, welcome to the Court Vision Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Duffield. Today we have a very special guest, Chicago's finest son by way of Georgia. It's my privilege to welcome on Brian Mikell. Thanks for coming on, man. How are you today?
I'm great, Jack, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course, absolutely. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your basketball background. I know you're a Bulls fan. Were you ever a Hawks fan?
You know what? When I was so originally I'm from Georgia, and I done lived like a bunch of places all over the world, honestly. And growing up, I mean, people didn't really root for the Georgia teams. You know what I mean? Because they all have been so bad at various times. And
college football.
Yeah, University of Georgia, absolutely. But like the Falcons and the Braves had like a long history of being bad, but then in the early 90s, they got good. And then the Hawks had the Dominique years where they were like right at the cusp. And then they had like a weird kind of funky run in the mid 90s. So it was never, you know what I mean? Like grew up the typical young guy who grew up in the 90s, you know, big, huge Jordan fan, just because he was so overarching for, you know, basketball people. But then, yeah, when I lived in Chicago, man, I did become a big Bulls fan. I'm not gonna lie. So I always kind of check in to see what they're doing, which is funny. They fired Jim Boylan today.
Yeah, breaking news.
Breaking news. Just fired Jim Boylan. So, you know, living in Chicago and going to, especially having tickets and going during the rise of D Rose, that solidified me as a Bulls fan. Because, you know, it was just like, it was amazing to watch him go from local kid, seeing him play at Simeon, and then seeing him play for the Bulls. It was just like, you know, and seeing him get hurt, you know, all that kind of thing. It just made me like really, really made me a Bulls fan.
Right. How long have you had the season tickets?
Since 2011.
Okay, so what, Rose, that's the Rose MVP year? That was your first year?
Yeah, Rose MVP year.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Yeah, I mean, and that year too, he went to another place, like as a basketball player, he just stepped up. Like, you know, I thought he was going to be great. I thought he was going to be really, really good. But in that year, I know there was some LeBron fatigue, you know, because he had won, I think, 2 in a row. And I think like just how well the Bulls played as a unit. And then he was just this young, fearless player. And that team was so deep and so built to kind of like grind it out in this like weird kind of blue collar Midwest Chicago style. Like they were like, he was a star and he had flash, but a lot of those dudes were just kind of like hard hat, lunch pail kind of guys, like Dang and Noah and Taj Gibson. Like they just had a lot of like gritty players.
And there was booze on that team too. And I think that does get lost a little bit because, I mean, D Rose's stardom is unquestionable, but that was a great team. I mean, that went down Eastern Conference Finals.
Absolutely. And I think like one of the weird things is like if that team had been able to if Derrick Rose, you know, that's the biggest if in a long time, right? Or one of the biggest ifs. If he doesn't get hurt and Jimmy Butler just kind of naturally progresses, right? So that core is Butler, Rose, probably Dang at his tail end, Noah during his prime, and Taj Gibson, and then a bunch of role players like really, really strong. They had a real strong bench, and Brewer and CJ Watson and Kyle Korver. Like they just had a lot of like solid dudes on that team, and it was coached by probably one of the best defensive coaches in the league in the last like 10, 15 years. But you know, it just that's kind of how the NBA goes. You know, something happens and you know, a player decides to leave or a player gets hurt or a coach gets fired, and then it just never comes together.
Yeah, no, I love Tibbs as a coach. I was surprised to see how quickly it fell apart in Minnesota, especially because, I mean, Jimmy Butler was his guy. I mean, it's a business, and he's got to look out for himself at the end, but I think that went incredibly south way faster than anyone anticipated.
Agreed. I don't think most coaches could be coaches and general managers. I think you are very rare, you know, and too, if I'm running an organization, I don't know if I really want to turn over that kind of power to one person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Exactly. Checks and balances. And two, like you got to have one guy looking 3 years down the road. You got to have a guy looking at winning tonight's game. Right. And so I don't know if Thibodeau, other than saying, I'm going to get a bunch of defensive stoppers and guys who could yell ice, and rotate towards the baseline. I don't know if he was built for, you know what I mean, like trading players and thinking about assembling teams. And, you know, you think about Jimmy Butler with Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. That's a tough marriage because those are young dudes who might want to be a little more coddled. And then you put them with Jimmy Butler, who is not the lovey, huggy, make you feel good. He's the kind of bust your balls, be on your back type. And so it went really south really fast.
Which I think because the basketball fit made sense. You know, you've got two guards and a big, or two wings and a big, you know, interchangeable. But the personalities, I mean, Jimmy Butler's personality, his story is so unique coming up, being homeless, a true grind his whole life versus like AAU darling, especially Andrew Wiggins. I mean, coming out of Canada.
Wiggins.
and just the number one pick the whole time. So.
Yeah, and I think like, you know, Wiggins, his story, you know, I think that's always going to be the knock on him. You know, coming out of Kansas, people was like, what's his motor like? Does he really care? You know, he got the talent to be a straight A student, but all he makes is C's. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of been his narrative for a long time, and it hasn't really changed. But he's only been in the league, you know, he's been in the league, what, 6 years now?
Yeah, but they're just so young when they come in now. He's probably only 25 or so.
Exactly. So, but you know, if ever there was a place for, you know, the Andrew Wiggins of the world to figure it out, it's probably in Golden State, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's the best situation for any ball player. I can't believe KD leave. The more you think about it, looking back, how do you leave that spot?
But you just referenced it like a second ago, and I think it's super true, right? These guys' personalities matter almost as much as their positional fits, right? Like,
right.
If you're in a situation where your personality doesn't allow you to feel comfortable or connected, you know, like I think KD never felt connected to the Warriors' like inner dynamic. It's like if me and you met in college, but you and your homeboy, y'all met in high school. You know what I mean? I'm always gonna be you would be telling stories that happened when you were in 9th grade that I won't know anything about. And I'm like, oh, I thought we were all friends. And it's like, yeah, we are, but you guys are on a deeper level. And I think that Warriors team, you know, they went through the ups and the downs and the struggles and the blah, blah, blah. So I do think basketball is about talent, but I do think there's a big, huge part of personality fit or personality traits that have to kind of line up.
Absolutely. The chemistry definitely matters. I mean, it does in life. I mean, everyone's relationships, work, it has to matter. I mean, if it matters in every level, how can it not matter when it's Game 7 of the finals, last shot, you got to trust in each other.
Absolutely. And I think it's easy, you know, that's something too with basketball. I think it's easy to not have issues when everything's going smoothly. But what happens when, you know, I think like people kind of look at it now and they say the downfall of that Warriors team with KD is when Draymond called out KD and they had that whole back and forth and Dre called him every name in the book. And it was just like that. It never really fit together again after that moment. And that, you know, you can see how that could make sense.
And we all saw that, and that was the talk for weeks of like, well, is this the end of the Warriors dynasty? And I mean, we all kind of knew it then, and you hope for the best, and you just think about like, oh, KD, you know, who doesn't want 7 rings, you know, just stay there and keep winning. But yeah, that was bad. And I think everyone knew kind of that the next like minute after that this is over. He's not coming back next year more than likely.
Yeah, I think his coach, I think Steve Kerr is one of my favorite people to hear talk about basketball because he's been around basically all the greats, right? Or when you think about the amount of guys he's been around some of the just like singularly super talented basketball players who've ever been on the court. He spent a lot of time in San Antonio and got to be around Duncan and Popovich, and then all the years with Jordan. Then he goes to the Suns. He's around Nash. And then he goes to the Warriors, you know, and he's around Curry and Clay and Dre and then KD. And he just kind of got a chance to see like all of the dynamics. And I think he kind of referenced that KD was their best player and the kind of player who could save them from any situation. But also too, that he kind of never completely fit. And so like you really kind of see like just how lots of things have to line up for you to have a really good basketball team and for it to last for a really long time. Guys got to be willing to tread lightly sometimes, to be, you know, cheerleader and coach and best friend and homeboy. Like you got to be everything and team therapist. Like you got to have a bunch of deep relationships and trusted people around you. And when it doesn't work out, You know, it does. It is sad in a way because we like these guys, we like these teams, and we just wonder what the dynamics are, right? Like I think that's something that me and you have talked about before. Like if you watch a team like let's say the Lakers, what's the team chemistry and what's the team dynamics, right? Because you got Vogel and you got Kidd, but then also you got LeBron, who might be the biggest, other than Jordan, who's bigger than LeBron. Yeah. And then you got Anthony Davis, then you got Clutch in the background. So you got all of these things, and it's just like, how do you make them all work so you can win?
That's true. I think the Lakers behind the scenes are all well aligned because of Clutch. So I don't see like any problems LeBron and AD ever coming up. But you never know.
I probably agree. I think too, because LeBron, even though his basketball game suggests he's a certain kind of way, I think his personality, he's just like wide open. You know what I mean? Like I think that me and you talked about this before. I think the young Lakers, when they had Ball and Ingram, they weren't long for the team just because LeBron and young guys, that's just not a thing. Like he's not there for young guys. He want to get veterans in who could play with him. But as far as like being a teammate and somebody who will support you or like the kind of teammate you want to play with, he seems very much like that kind of guy.
Everyone seems to give him like raving reviews, and even like his co-stars versus like the last guy on the bench. I mean, it seems like he's a good teammate. But another thing you just touched on, the coaching situation of the Lakers, I think that's played out incredibly well versus what people were predicting at the start of the year. There wasn't any, J. Kidd versus Vogel nights. It seemed that Vogel, he was the head coach, and J. Kidd, I don't know if he just fell in line or just he found his niche or whatever, but I think that's worked out incredibly well. They've been hit every expectation I've had. So
I agree with you. I think we saw it throughout the season, and I think we saw flashes of it in the bubble. The Lakers, Vogel said it real early on that the Lakers were going to have to hang their hat on defense, and that was I think a lot of people went defense, and it was like, yeah, like if we're one of the best defensive teams in the league, we could win a championship. And that was kind of his mantra from the very beginning. And then once you kind of realize that defensively, they are pretty sound most nights. You know what I mean? They're a tough defensive team. It travels. You know what I mean? Like they protected the rim really well this year. LeBron has really given effort on the defensive end. Sometimes, he could tune in and tune out defensively. We saw it happen in Cleveland a couple of times. But Anthony Davis and Dwight Howard, and even Kuzma's really tried, especially in the bubble, he's really tried to be a better defender. You know what I mean? And I think AC, underrated is not even the right word. AC is a legit good defensive guard. He's going to struggle with the best guards in the league because everyone's going to struggle with the best guards in the league. But I think that team defensively has another level to go to when shots aren't falling, when they're in foul trouble or whatever. They still can bring guys off the bench who are really good defenders.
Yeah, with the loss of Avery Bradley, and at least just really judging off the bubble, Caruso's turned into one of their best perimeter defenders. I mean, at least consistently. So he might have to guard Dame. I mean, we're going to find out this first round, depending on how the Grizzlies versus Portland play comes out. But, I mean, most people expect Portland, but I don't think they're going to start Caruso. So I don't think we're going to see him lined up on Dame, but he's going to have to really step up if they're going to beat the Blazers.
So I just want to say this. I think the narrative is always kind of one of the fun things about basketball is that we get all these, exciting narratives that last for, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 days because the basketball shelf life is so quick. People are like, man, Portland's going to be trouble for the Lakers. And it's like, that's not true. That's not true anywhere. You saw the game last night. They struggled to beat Brooklyn. I think I could get a solid 6 minutes a game for Brooklyn in the bubble. Brooklyn was terrible in the bubble, and you saw the Blazers struggle mightily to guard last night. They couldn't guard anybody. Guys like LeVert got to the rim at will. People got into the lane at will, and it was just that's not the kind of team defensively that's going to give the Lakers a lot of problems. You know what I mean? They got a ton of talent, and they could really score the ball, and you're going to have nights where Dame just I think if you're the Lakers, you're just going to have to live with Dame doing Dame stuff. What can you do?
One thing that doesn't get touched on is the Blazers don't have a good answer for LeBron. I mean, you're going to maybe throw Melo at him, but then after that, it's Hazonia, like the Basemores of the world. It's not pretty. And I don't think Melo can really, if you want him to give you anything on offense, he's not going to be able to guard LeBron down low for very long. So
Very true. I think that's the trade-off. Athletically, Hazonia is the type of player who could stay in front of LeBron, but I think playoff LeBron and regular season LeBron, two different animals. And I think once the playoffs really start rolling, I think you're going to get a heavy dose of LeBron, AD pick and rolls. And I don't know who really can guard that in the entire league, because AD pick and pop game is pretty solid. But when he makes his mind up that, hey, I'm going to face up and get to the rim, or I'm going to get to a free throw line, he's pretty deadly. And I think LeBron managed kind of his moments throughout the second half of the season. Like if we go all the way back before the bubble, when he played against the Bucks, when they beat the Bucks and then they beat the Clippers, you saw in those games, LeBron could still take over, for extended stretches with not even scoring. You know what I mean? He's getting guys wide open looks. So I do think, after that play-in situation, whatever happens with that, I do think the Blazers are favorites to win. But, man, I would really like to see Memphis, just because Ja, he's going to have a big, big moment coming up at some point. But I would really love to see him, in the playoffs.
yeah, because honestly, I think the Dame Lillard run, that's something we were going to touch on later, just to kind of preview it now. They're not going to win the finals this year.
No.
So this is a great story. But then another thing, if he's giving all this energy night in, night out just to make the playoffs, and then the first round he's gassed because, like you're saying, especially now, the turnaround is so quick. I mean, these guys are playing every other day. Weird times too. Like some games are at 9 o'clock at night, 9:30 in the morning. I saw one game. So they're not getting the rest. I mean, there's no travel, which has to count for a lot. But I think we could see a lot of guys, once the playoff really kicks up and you had to gas yourself into the playoffs, where the other teams have been coasting, that might really start to show.
Yeah, and too, I think, the Blazers can't win without Dame having a big night. You know what I mean? His ability to just kind of go off is what's been saving them, and that's not really the sign of a great, or not even a good team. You know what I mean? They're mediocre. I know they had injuries early. Zach Collins missed a lot of time. Yusef Nurkic missed a lot of time. They picked up Melo and had to integrate him into what they do, and then kind of bubble Melo has been a revelation to some degree. But defensively, that team has always had, issues, if you ask me. I think it starts with them having an undersized backcourt. Dame and CJ are pretty small guys. Yeah. You ask them to do a lot defensively, and then they carry a huge load offensively. I just think that's a great recipe for that team. But, kudos to Dame, man. He just, kudos to him. He's just been really, really, really playing a hell of a game in the bubble.
I think he's been, of the last 5-10 years, one of the most consistently underrated true superstars that we have, because he's been doing this for years, and he was getting snubbed in the All-Star games, dropping diss tracks the whole time, letting us trying to let us know that he's here. And I think this is finally, because it's Portland, it's a small market. They honestly have never been a contender, so you're not seeing them night in, night out like you do the other teams. It's easy to forget about them, but I'm glad that he's finally gotten this stage on national TV to show his stuff and really let us all know.
I agree 100%.
All right, so maybe dive into some playoff matchups here. So we've got Bucks, Magic in the East, start out East. I think the Giannis suspension, that might make it go 5, but that's going to be pretty buttoned up from the jump. Bucks are going to win that easy.
Yeah, I think that's a walkthrough for the Bucks. I do think, just thinking about Orlando, they got a lot of pieces, but what's the fit? You know what I mean? If you got if you got Vujicic and Bamba, and I know Jonathan Isaacs is probably going to miss all the next year.
Yeah.
So they got a ton of, you got Mikell, who's looked at times really, really good. I'm glad he's been able to get his career back on. But just think about that Orlando team. What are they? Isn't a collection of young tweens who don't really play a ton of, they can't really play positionless basketball because some of their guys are so limited. You know, like Gordon isn't a playmaker distributor type, right? And then Fournier handles a lot for them, but he isn't like a next level scorer, right? He has a decent outside shot. So that's a weird team. And I just wonder, you know, where's Orlando going? Like, what is their 3-year goal? But yeah, that series, I think that's a snooze fest right there. I think the Bucks handle them pretty quickly.
I agree with that. I think the Magic, especially touching on the Blazers, they've never really been constructed that well, and I think that's the Magic's biggest problem. I don't know what the trade would be, but if the Blazers could like get a healthy Jonathan Isaac and have him on that team, that's an instant contender in my opinion. I mean, now he's injured and it's down the line, and I don't know what Portland would have to give up. They don't have a ton of assets other than their 2 guards that you really would want going forward. I guess Gary Trent Jr., he's been a little bit of a revelation, but he's not Jonathan Isaac. But I just hate seeing these teams that are so poorly put together and they're only 1 or 2 moves away. And you have all these redundant pieces. Like you've got 5 bigs and just, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to figure out. I mean, you need some wings, you need some guards.
Yeah, you need some who can put the ball in the basket, right? That's always going to be a question first and foremost. Then who can distribute and get other guys good looks, right? So I think they might have found their long-term point guard in Markelle Fultz, right? He's just only going to get better as he gets more confidence and more playing time. Next to him, you got Terrence Ross and Fournier, and neither one of those guys strike me as a long-term solution as a 2 or as a wing, not a 2 or 3, but as a wing scorer. Aaron Gordon has a ton of talent and has gotten a lot better in the last 2 years, but I don't know if he's your 3rd best player, you probably got a championship contender. But if he's your 2nd best player, it might be dicey at best.
That's a long way up. I'm surprised no one's gone for him because I could see him being a great complementary piece, like you're saying, to other superstars. But I just think maybe the Magic value him higher because that really is like their best bet. Because Vooch, I think, is their most talented player, night in, night out. I mean, Isaac could be that guy, but he's not there yet.
Yeah.
And that's just not today's game. I mean, you've got your best player is a big. Aaron Gordon's your 2nd best player. You're the 8th seed in the East. I mean, I guess they're slotted right where they should be.
There you go.
All right, so next is the Raptors and Nets. And I think the Nets, you know, they didn't have to win that many games to get in the playoffs, but considering the guys they put out there, they've done pretty well for themselves. But I think that's going to be pretty quick too, maybe 5s, but I see Raptors sweeping that, honestly. They're such a good team. They've been together so long now.
Agreed. I think that's a sweep in my book for the Raptors because the Raptors just have so much talent on the defensive side of basketball. Like, I watched them play the Lakers, man, and the Lakers, like, at times you could tell the Lakers wanted to get into the game, and the Raptors were just like, no, thank you. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and then, too, they're one of those teams that the complete opposite of Orlando. There's a lot of thought in their players and the overlap of what they do, right? Like Boucher.
Absolutely.
And
OG Anunoby, they've got so many pieces.
Exactly. They got so many guys who are long defensive wings who can do similar things. Like all of them are like a tier under Siakam, but between Van Vliet and Lowry and Gasol and Ibaka, like you just got a ton of professional basketball players up and down that roster.
Yeah, that's one of the most like well-put rosters in the league. I mean, I think the Clippers, just their top-end talent so high now, adding those PG and Kawhi. But I think if you're going to start like a franchise, just want to go into a situation, what Masai's built in Toronto is, I think, the kind of the gold standard right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna put this out there. I think they're the sleeper to get Giannis.
Really?
I do, because if you're Giannis, like they got a superstar there and immediately won a championship. So I think Masai could easily have that conversation with him that if you come there, we could build a championship around you in a year because they got so many pieces. You know what I mean? So I'm just putting that out there early. I think they're the sleeper favorite for a guy like Giannis.
And especially not to get too much into politics and everything else. I mean, he is not an American. So what he doesn't have any ties here. I mean, he would probably enjoy being in Canada more, especially right now with the virus and everything. I mean, hell, I'd go to Toronto right now. You know, give me my
And if you're talking about diverse cities in the world, like what's more diverse than Toronto? Like Toronto is just like a beautiful city. Like it is fantastic. So I just wanted to put that little nugget out there. Maybe we'll come back to it, have a little hot take topic, you know what I mean? But I think if just the way they're constructed, and just how well they're coached, right? Like when they fired Dwayne Casey, everybody was like, well, who is Nick Nurse? And then Nick Nurse just the offense and the defense, right? They play a free-flowing offense where the ball just doesn't stick. Last year, you did see Kawhi kind of bail them out, especially in that Game 7 against Philly when no one wanted to shoot. But I do think, after that year, those dudes have swag, and I think they're going to walk into the playoffs with a ton of confidence.
I agree. And especially, they fired a Coach of the Year winner. That is, I think that's the first time that's ever happened. I should have looked that up first, but how unprecedented is that? Going to fire – that's like you don't let go of the MVP. You might trade him for something, but my God, you're going to let that – they didn't let him walk. They fired him too. And that's just tough. So, I guess they knew Nick Nurse was that guy, but no one else did. So, all credit to the guy on that.
Yeah, that was crazy. But, he made the right decision because ultimately they won. But at the time, it was kind of a head-scratcher because that Toronto team was they were good, but no one thought that they could really ever challenge the Cavs because LeBron was better. It was like LeBronto
and we saw it so many times play out. It was inevitable. That's the best thing about the Warriors breaking up and LeBron going west is we finally have a competitive league. There was no balance in the league really since 2011 when he went to Miami, LeBron. We knew they were coming out of the East and maybe there was a couple teams in the West, but there just wasn't a lot of debate going into the year. And this is the first season we've had in almost a decade where you had true debates and wonder about who's going to be there at the end. We kind of knew LA, but it was more wide open than it's ever had been.
Yeah, I love it. I love, a certain level of parity in the NBA because we rarely get it. We rarely get wide open years where you're just like, anybody could win the championship this year. But I think even going into the year, there was a ton of uncertainty. But Toronto could get back. They could get back to the finals.
Oh, absolutely. So the next matchup, Celtics 76ers, my poor 76ers, no Ben Simmons. But I think this is the first matchup that we're talking about that the actual matchups in game are really going to matter because Celtics don't have a big center. Their best center right now is Theis. He's only 6'8", and Embiid's 7'1". He can go off for 40 at any minute, but he's had a couple injury problems right now. But I still see the Celtics taking it, maybe 5, probably 6. But just the Joel Embiid matchup is going to be a problem, but they don't have any answers for the Celtics wings and guards without Ben Simmons, I think. You got Josh Richardson, but I just don't think it's going to be enough. But this is the first matchup that we've gotten to that's actually interesting. So,
agreed. I'm gonna take the 76ers.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I got the 76ers in 6 games. The reason something that I've always thought about the 76ers is that whenever one of the 2 big guys were out, not necessarily big guys per se, but whenever one of their stars wasn't available, whether it was Simmons or Embiid, the other naturally played well because they had got to play in the areas and the positions that they like to be in. And Ben Simmons loves to occupy the lane, because he's an enormous guy, like 6'8", 6'9". And he likes to kind of run a lot of high screens, and whenever there's not a center clogging up the lane, he could be really effective. So if you take Simmons out of that lineup and you get Embiid and Horford, Korkmaz, Shake Middleton, Scott, you get to put more shooters around Embiid and just play kind of old school basketball. The only real kryptonite that the Celtics have is they don't have a lot of size and strength. Everything else they're really good at. Defensively, offensively, they are dynamic in most places. They're 1, 2, 3, and then their bench production, you got Smart and Hayward. Like, you just got a bunch of wings. Yet again, another team that is constructed in a way to attack what most teams struggle to guard is really talented wing players. But the problem in that series is the advantage that Philadelphia has is so tilted towards them winning to me because you put him in the middle. What are you going to do on the nights when Embiid says, okay, I want to be the best player in the league? Mm-hmm. Like if he comes out and plays up to his potential, which has always been can he, and you saw it last year. Last year he played really well throughout the playoffs.
Oh, absolutely.
They had some moments where I think having Jimmy Butler there really kind of changed their dynamic.
Well, they're such a bad fit for each other, kind of like what you're saying, because they both want to be in the same spot. And Ben Simmons, I've loved Ben Simmons out of high school, been rooting for him. He's never developed a shot though, and without a shot, I mean, his game is so predictable. I mean, that's the worst part. He's good. He is kind of like, Magic Johnson light or 2.0, but without a shot, there's just, he's going to come down the lane. It's kind of the same problem Giannis was having, but Giannis actually took the time and made his shot better. I don't know if Ben Simmons, if it's a body composition thing, he just isn't going to be a good shooter or what, but that's a bad fit. And I think if Philly, really can take off during a playoff run, they need to get Ben out of there because it's just not going to work out, especially if you can people want to give you something for him, because I think Embiid's ceiling is higher unless Simmons can get a shot. I mean, if Simmons can get a shot, then his ceiling is through the roof. But at this point, you can't rely on that. So I would keep Embiid, try to move on to Simmons this summer if you have even any success in the playoffs this year.
I think so too. I think just like what you could get back, right, for Simmons, you could possibly get back a very talented player and a pick, and I think that's the sort of thing that right now, if you're the 76ers, what kind of team are we going to be going for, right? Because if everything kind of points towards you lean into the big man because the big man is so good right now. And I know fans, our tendency is to want to blow it up, switch it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're still really young, both of those pieces, and they got to the conference finals last year. So, are we just saying what we want to see happen, or are we really talking about what's best for the 76ers? I think as a fan of basketball, they probably should stay together and just try to get a coach in there who could figure out how to best use both of them. But, just the hot take in me wants them to trade Simmons for a piece and then watch that piece kind of – to me, I think Embiid should be taking 30 shots a night. I don't know if physically he in the condition always. He looked the best I've seen in a long time. He just looks great. But it's just he's such a matchup nightmare for 95% of the teams in the league that I think you should just run through what works. And they will do it against the Celtics. But do they have enough defensively to stop the Celtics' wings? Because Tatum, Brown, Hayward, Smart, and Kemba are all dudes who could give you something offensively. It varies because I think Tatum, when he's feeling it, could be a guy who gives you a very efficient 25 to 30 points a night. And then Kemba has all the talent in the world too. Jaylen Brown is kind of a hard read sometimes because he does so much for you that at the end of the night, he might have, 18, 11, 7, a couple steals, a couple blocks, but he's just kind of a Swiss Army now. He's very Scottie Pippen light, if you ask me.
Yeah, and being on that team, there's so many good players. You can't shine every night. So I think people you may forget how good Jaylen Brown is, but I love Jaylen Brown. I think
me too.
He's a baller. He is an all-star. In any other team, he'd get the minutes and he'd have those numbers.
Agreed. He gets the touches and the minutes, and somebody would be saying, hey, could we run our offense through him? Could he be a facilitator? He'd be getting those kinds of looks, but you just got to think about that team since he came into the league, all the talent and success that's been around him, that he's never really gotten the kind of bad team progression that lots of players kind of find themselves. They get drafted to poor situations, and then they kind of mature into, whatever they're going to be. He just was asked kind of from the very beginning to fit a role, which he's done eloquently.
All right, my last Ben Simmons take, because I don't think he's going to get a 3 shot. But if he gets at least a solid mid-range jumper, he could run a pick and roll with Embiid. I could see that. You could keep that together and really make that into something with a couple more pieces. So you're right. They shouldn't just give up on Simmons, but that's my guy, and I love him. So I just I'm hoping maybe, grass is greener somewhere else and he can finally develop. But I hate seeing the same thing over and over with him. And I've loved him since high school, and I think he really can be that guy. He's bigger than LeBron, honestly. He can pass. He can handle the ball. He's fast. He's got all these tools.
He has if somebody said he literally, if you're just talking about the physicality and the sheer size to play a position, him as kind of your point forward, no one can match up with him. But I think this is the thing me and you have talked about on previous occasions. It's not necessarily the fact that he can't shoot, more so than he won't shoot. You know what I mean? That's a really bad sign. You know, both of us have cut our teeth at various places playing pickup basketball. And what you realize is that the guy who won't even shoot the ball, you just can't be out there.
Yeah.
You're not a threat. The defense not guarding you, they're not respecting you, they don't think you could do anything. So, and then as the game goes on, you just gonna only naturally lose confidence. And I think for him, he's already like, well, I'm not taking that shot. That's not my shot. And then the defense is like, because the NBA defense is so smart and coaches are so good, they're like, look, we only gonna give you that. You're gonna have to beat us. And then at the end of the game, what do? You can't run a pick and roll with him because he's a bad free throw shooter. And you can't have somebody out there who can't space the floor. You know what I mean? Like even a guy like Korkmaz you saw the other night, like he was making threes and you could see the court look bigger, right? And when Al Horford's out there with Embiid and they run action away from Horford or to get Embiid stuff, and Horford just kind of like drifts into spots. That's what they need, a guy who could kind of take those shots, make those shots. But I mean, the first rule of shooting is you got to shoot it. Like you got to take the shots. You got to put them up.
Yeah, you miss all the ones you don't take. I mean,
there you go.
I think he's still so young too, and he's coming in with that body, and he has that body. Giannis had to grow into it. It took him 4 or 5 years to become what he is now, and then he's even taken another 2 steps every year. But Ben Simmons, he's only like 21, 22 years old, and he's already built out like a statue. So I think there's still, you can't sell it out yet, but the clock is on in Philly. I mean, at some point you just have to, you got to do something. I mean, you can't just run it back every year.
Yeah, I think the last point I'll make about them, I think the first place to start at is I'm not 100% sold on Brett Brown, and I think Brett Brown's a fantastic coach. I just think those two personalities are outside personalities, right? They're young stars. Embiid, he could be the face of the league. He's so funny, and he like Shaq-esque. You know what I mean? He loves the drama. He loves the moment. He loves the attention. No one will be Shaq, because Shaq crosses, so many, Shaq is Shaq. No one will be Shaq. But Embiid is a funny guy who's confident in himself, loves to be interviewed, loves to be the center of attention. And then also, too, he's not afraid to, like, get in teammates' faces. He's not afraid to get in opponents' faces. The feud that he has going with Drummond is one of the funniest things ever. And so, I do think if I was going to make a change, the first place I change is probably Brett Brown, and see if I could get a coach in there who may be a little more dynamic offensively. See what happens. But
I hear that, Brett Brown is this great coach, but I haven't seen it yet. I mean, I know he's a Spurs guy. He's got a lot of success. I mean, he's got the dubs on his record, but I mean, that wasn't his team. So I haven't seen him personally in charge of this team really take the lead. Because especially earlier this year, I mean, pre-shutdown, feels like 10 years ago now, but they had Horford, Simmons, and Embiid all out there on the floor at the same time. And I mean, just as a coach, you can't do that, man. You just
also too, their home and road records are insane. Like they're so good at home and terrible on the road. So I know that doesn't really affect the bubble, but a lot of that makes you wonder about coaching and preparation, and also to our guys tuning you out. So I think Philly's first move is probably, is nothing we haven't seen before in the NBA. But I do wonder if you just kind of say, hey, Brett, maybe we go in another direction and see what happens. But you do have a huge chip in your back pocket if you want to make a move, because, Simmons on another team, there's so many teams in the league right now. If you drop Simmons into where he was surrounded by shooters or just a couple shooters, and it changes their dynamic overnight. Mm-hmm. Someone who could run your offense, get your other guys really good looks. You could place Simmons at the 4. He could be your stretch 5 at times. You know what I mean? Even I know he's not shooting it, but defensively, most nights he's not going to get beat up. But yeah, it's a lot of places that you really have to take a long look and think, man, could you fit him into what they're doing in that place?
Absolutely, because I think if you put him on like the Suns per se, oof, my God. Actually, what I would love to see just from like basketball fantasy nerd would be Book and Simmons on the Knicks, try to bring them back to relevancy, because I think that'd be a good fit for each other. I mean, just take the ball out of Ben Simmons' hands unless you need it, and put his ass down low. I mean, my God.
Agreed. I think though, just to get off on a little quick tangent, I wonder if the Suns figured something out.
It seems like it. I mean, the bubble Suns are one of the greatest stories in modern NBA takes right now.
But the way they play, right? And they showed a little clip last night on Inside the NBA of Monty Williams talking to them, and one of the things he said was, "This is the NBA. This is how you have to play night after night if you want to compete."
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think sometimes you could see a team like, I'm trying to think in recent history. Now, it usually happens in the playoffs, but the bubble is a different sort of situation. And the fact that they went undefeated makes you wonder, maybe they learned something about themselves that they didn't already know. But I remember when Oklahoma City, the year they make it to the finals and lose to Miami, that year you could see as the playoffs went along that those guys had figured out, this is what we should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we should, like, Harden and Westbrook and Durant are the only guys who really should be shooting the ball. Oh, okay. And so I think you kind of realize when you watch the Suns that, okay, Ricky Rubio is their point guard. He is their primary ball handler. Devin Booker shouldn't be handling the ball unless he's attacking, right? Mikell Bridges is another wing player who is a 3-and-D kind of guy. I just wonder, like, did they figure something out? Ayton is a very big, very talented piece for them. So I'm in my basketball fantasy brain. Yes, I would love for them to make some kind of move and bring in another piece. But I'm just wondering if they think, hey, maybe we figured something out and we should stand pat. My fantasy wonder place for somebody like Simmons before the Warriors traded D'Angelo Russell.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that would be the perfect fit for Simmons. You trade Russell and that first round draft pick that they have coming up for this year to the 76ers for Simmons.
Play him at the 5, have all the shooters. Oh, man.
Exactly. You get a shooter and a point guard for Embiid and a pick, a huge pick. And then you get with Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Ben Simmons. That's going to be a very, very tough lineup.
That's a great lineup. Oof. I'm going to have to do a 2K sim of that later. That's great. All right, so the last one for the Heat. The Heat and the Pacers. Sabonis is out. Oladipo is still working his way back. Wish him the best. I really like Oladipo's game, especially I followed him closely in Orlando. They shouldn't have traded him. Another bad move. But
yep.
And one of the matchups, T.J. Warren, he's been a bubble revelation, but his worst game in the bubble so far was against the Heat because they have the correct kind of body to throw at him. They got Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and they held him to 12 points. I mean, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, 12 points, but all of it came in the first half. He had the big squad douche in the second half. Zilch, nothing. And so I don't really think in first and foremost, let me back up a little bit. Miami is a really good team. Not great, but good. But they have an amazing coach, in my estimation, Spoelstra. I think Spo is one of the most underrated coaches in the league. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league. If you're talking about being prepared every single night to play basketball, Eric Spoelstra is going to make sure those guys are ready to go. Defensively, they're not going to give up a lot.
No.
And what you get, you're going to have to fight for it. And so, like, I think if you start with Butler, you got Crowder, you got Hero, you got Duncan, you got Nunn, you got a bunch of guys who you could just throw at wings until you just run them down. You know what I mean? Just the best wings in the league going to be able to, handle Hero and Duncan, like, easily. But no one's suggesting that T.J. Warren or Oladipo coming off the injury are going to be at their heights. I think Warren and Oladipo playing together for a whole year next year going to the playoffs might be a strong tandem, especially this might be a different series if they had Sabonis. But
he's their best player probably. I mean, other than T.J. Warren coming out of the gates here. But
Yeah, I think he's their most important. I think he's their MVP because his rebounding rate, his offensive rebounding rate is insane, and he creates so many matchups. You know what I mean? And he initiates the offense a lot of times for them. So I think without that piece, I think the Heat don't really struggle with him. I think the Heat probably are head and shoulders better than him right now. But Indiana's got a bright future.
Absolutely. And that's just, I mean, it fell off, but that used to be a great rivalry in the East, the Miami and the Pacers during all those LeBron years.
Well, I mean, the Pacers, they went a couple of decades where it was just like they're a team that most teams just don't want to play because they play like a very Indiana brand of basketball, right? Is a defensive struggle. They run a ton of pick and rolls. They've had a bunch of players who, when you think back to the Paul George, David West, Roy Hibbert run, that team defensively was super sound. Vogel was the coach. And they really gave the Heat all they could handle. You know what I mean? They was just one player away from probably winning that series. But they were a team that the Bulls would struggle with, like, routinely, just because they've always played tough basketball. Even if you go back to the 90s, they just play a certain brand of defensive basketball that they're going to fight you. And I think, like, they got a bunch of those guys, like Oladipo, Malcolm Brogdon. I think T.J. Warren is a decent defender, not a great defender, but I think his, like, beef with Jimmy Butler kind of shows he got a little bit of teeth.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a team that they're another team that if they could turn a couple of their players into a better player, to an upgrade, they would be a dangerous team. But they just a bunch of, B's and C's and no real A's.
Well, I think Sabonis probably is a B plus borderline A depending on the night. I mean, a lot of this was pre-shutdown and everything, but he was going off routinely.
He was.
But it is a different kind of going off, though. I mean, it's not like Dame or James Harden. I mean, he's down there getting 15 boards, 10 assists, and 18, 20 points, It's different. But I think you need guys like that, though. I mean, the game is won on the scoreboard, but there's all these other stats that matter. And he's a guy, I think he would be a good fit in almost any situation. And maybe that style European center between the original Sabonis, Jokic, that's going to be – a lot of people are going to go that way now because you can run your offense from this guy down low, and then you have – because most guys now, AAU, you're just going to shoot anyway. So a lot of these guys are better off-ball players than they are on-ball. And I could see that working out in a lot of good ways.
That is very, very true. I think if you look at the league, the best teams have players, and they can put you in situations where multiple guys can do multiple things, right? Like if you're one-dimensional, unless that one dimension is insanely good, then, most teams kind of live and die with their ability to make you do multiple things on the offensive end or multiple switches on the defensive end, but I do think Sabonis, I just wonder if perimeter-wise, like if all those dudes are healthy, right, and they all let's say all of the Pacers players are healthy next year, and they all play to their potential, what seed are they? Are they better than Toronto? Are they better than Milwaukee? Are they better than Miami? Are they better than Boston?
I think they might be better than Miami, especially I would play Miles Turner maybe at the 4, keep Sabonis at the center for your starting out. But then that would take away a lot from your bench because, he's been really good off the bench for him. So you're right, though. I mean, they're not going to be a top 2 team no matter how it plays out. So
exactly. So it's like what's their feeling? So, this is something me and you talked about before. And I think a lot of NBA fans and a lot of NBA Twitter is on this. If you're not competing for the championship, just blow it up anyway, right? Because it makes sense. It makes sense. At that point, you're just hoping someone gets hurt or what are you doing? And I think the Pacers, just thinking about their pieces, I like a lot of their individual pieces, but as a collective, that's not a team that's going to make an Eastern Conference Finals barring injury.
That's true. Because, we've kind of seen it in Houston. I thought it would blow up in their face a little bit more, going all in, all those Warriors years, trading the picks, trading their younger players. But, I guess we'll just see when that runs out finally. I think next year might be where they finally run into trouble with, Russ. His athletic game is going to start to decline. He's injured now, so it's not going to help him out this year in the playoffs too much. So I'm curious to see how the Houston thing plays out, because we're in like year 6 of this experiment of having like not a great bench, no real youth talent coming up. It's going to run out eventually.
All right, so we pretty much have finished the East, so we could jump to the West. But just to Houston is a fascinating case study, right? Like when we think about all the iterations of that team, and we think about how close they've been. You know, the 0 for 23 from the 3-point line against the Warriors, you take that out. If they just go 3 for 20, they probably win that game.
2 or 3. That's true. That's true.
Exactly. But then it changes the narrative, right? Even getting to a finals changes the narrative. So if they get to the finals, who knows if they win or whatever. But the Houston thing is, it's unpopular, but the reality is the way they play, they are right to play that way. People hate it. People love it. Like, I think there's no more polarizing, great basketball player than James Harden. But they've gotten to places where they should have won. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they got close, but then last year was just like abject failure. Like, it was just like, what? They laid a huge egg last year. You know, KD goes out and they still lose. So it's just like, yes, you are right. They are pushing their chips so far forward that once they're out of chips, I don't know how they restart that organization unless they just, find another superstar talent and run it all back for another decade. But, like, the basketball purist in me is like torn watching it, but I love watching it. Like, I do. It's like eating a bag of chips for dinner. Like, you're going to feel like crap, but it's just them ice. Go for it.
You enjoyed it.
Exactly. I was like, oh man, I shouldn't eat this bag of chips and drink this beer, but I did it anyway. And I think like the Rockets just launching threes. Harden, I mean, what can you say about Harden? Like, he is unguardable.
He's come a long way. I think I used to be very anti-James Harden, just buying the cliche, no defense, bad teammate, doesn't pass the ball. But he has improved so much, and he has lost. Like, I mean, you cannot go out there and say he doesn't try on defense anymore. And he's a great passer of the ball. And he's like all of these labels that people put on him to kind of, downgrade him just because, whatever reason, he's done his best to take those off. So, I mean, as a former James Harden doubter / hater, I mean, I am all in now. Did you see that one where he was dribbling between his legs and it seemed like they sped it up 8 times? But no, that's just what you have to try to guard. I mean, there's no answer to that.
There is no answer, and I think like the like age-wise, I'm 40, and I've been watching basketball my whole life, and the narrative has always been kind of, this is what you do, and this is how you win, and people were really like, he is cheating the system by getting to the free throw line so much. And my response to that is, if you can do it, do it.
Yeah, I mean, are people mad at Steph for shooting threes because they're worth more than twos? I mean,
exactly. Like James Harden and the Warriors. I mean, the Rockets really leaned into that mentality as, if we're not getting dunks, we're shooting threes. Mm-hmm. And it's like D'Antoni. I heard a podcast with Steve Nash, and Steve Nash was like, one of our biggest regrets is that we didn't shoot more threes.
Right, I heard that one.
7 seconds or less 7 seconds or less Suns, they were just like, we should be shooting 33s a night. Like, they should have been the Rockets, but 12 years earlier. You know what I mean? They should have just been jacking up, because he was like, we had the players, we had the pieces. And I think we're going to look back on those Rockets teams and be like, they played a smart brand of basketball. They just couldn't get over the hump. And a big part of why they couldn't get over the hump is KD going to the Warriors. But they gave it all they had. And even going into this year, I think people were like, this is not a matchup that we want to face in the playoffs.
Right. Well, it's like you've said. I mean, there's all these moments in history, and all we do is remember the result. Where, like, if you go back to 2007, I think it was the Suns-Spurs, the Western Conference Final. I mean, if the Suns won, they were going to beat the LeBron James Cavs. I mean, anyone was going to beat that team if you have a solid lineup. Mm-hmm. And then it's just and you just lose so much of history. So it's good. We got to go back and touch on these things and remind people that it's not just who won the MVP, who won the finals that year, that all of this matters. Your resume really does count. And we remember it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll look at. I don't think we'll do it right now, right? But in like 2 or 3 years, or let's say the Rockets decide, okay, it's done, and they decide to blow it up, and Harden still has value, and they trade Harden for bag of beans and some draft picks or whatever. We're gonna look at his like 2013 to 2019 and be like, what was this? Like some kid in 20 years is going to be watching these YouTube clips and being like, who was this guy? Why didn't this guy win every championship? Or why didn't this guy win every MVP? Or why didn't this happen? Or, man, this guy's amazing. I think right now, because basketball Twitter is just so polarized about how to view Harden, is that we can't even really just enjoy the majesty of what he's doing every single night. Like, he's getting guys wide open looks. Like, I'm talking about PJ Tucker could not get his own wide open look if you know what I mean? Imagine, like, if you just say, hey, PJ Tucker, go out and get me 20 points tonight. He couldn't just be like, I'm going to do it. It's not happening at all. And two, the last thing I'll say about that Rockets thing is before Westbrook's, like, January, the end of December, his whole January stretch, he was on fire. And what the biggest takeaway from that was they just said, stop shooting threes. You shouldn't shoot as many threes. Mm-hmm. You're not a great three-point shooter, so stop shooting threes. Just attack. Put your head down and get to the cup. And you really
that. I mean, trading Clint Capella when you don't have any like respectable backup center even at all. I mean, you just got a bunch of power forwards. That's all in. That chips all the way in on that one.
All the way to the center of the table, baby. Let's see them cards. So I think, like, yeah, I think we're in the moment and we might not enjoy it, respect it, appreciate it. But I do think what they're doing is amazing on some level. But we don't give out, championship trophies for being amazing. You got to win. And so it's just like a lot of stuff gets trampled and lost in history because a guy didn't win.
Yeah, that's 100%. So quickly, just on the Thunder Rockets, I think the Thunder have been one of the best storylines all season, but Russ is potentially out at least the first few games. You got the Chris Paul revenge factor. And then we've touched on this a little bit. It hasn't bit him in the butt too much, but Steven Adams is a good professional NBA player, can get you 18, 20 points. What is Houston going to do about that? I mean, I don't know. You can't hang your hat on Steven Adams per se, but that is a problem.
So I agree with you. I do think, though there is some wisdom in what they're doing because we're not worried about Steven Adams' production.
Yeah, it's not the best point when you really break it down.
Exactly. He going to give us 30 and 20? No.
Yeah.
Will he have an impact on how the Rockets have to, like, box out and work the glass? Absolutely. He is an enormous man. You said a professional basketball player who is 7 feet tall and 250 plus pounds. So he is going to live around the basket and he is going to get putbacks and dunks and all of those things. But Steven Adams' numbers might not kill you. What will kill you for sure is Chris Paul going off in Chris Paul fashion with that 3-guard lineup at the end of games. And I think that's the thing that the Rockets, the danger of a Rockets Thunder playoff series for the Thunder not getting sucked into how the Rockets play. Because if you get sucked into how the Rockets play, you're going to lose 148, 143 every night.
And then we've seen them do it to the Jokic and Gobert and all these guys. I mean, they're just a disconnect. Like they shouldn't be out there. But that's your best player. So, I mean, how do you bench them? It's tough.
It is tough. It is definitely the coach has to, like, you got to play the long game, right? You're going to lose the game against the Rockets in the playoffs where they hit 26 threes. Mm-hmm. That's going to happen. And so you can't overreact to that. You can't say, oh, I'm going to bench my big guy or I'm going to go small. If you go small against the Rockets and you don't have the sort of track history of playing small basketball, like that super fast, tiny, basically it's called rocket ball. But if you don't do that, you're going to lose. Because what they're going to do is they're going to spread you out, and Harden is going to foul out whoever is guarding him. So stay at home, play the long game. If they make every single three, just shake their hands that night and count that they're not going to shoot that well the entire series. If they do, you're going to lose, regardless of what your game plan is.
And you would think most modern coaches, if you've been coaching the last 5 years, you had to play the Warriors, and everyone knew, do not play the Warriors game. Play your game. Don't fall into the trap. If you're going to run up and down with Steph, Draymond, and Clay, it's not going to work out in your favor. So it's kind of the same idea here. And I don't know why. I mean, they're still trying to throw the big guys at Houston, and not really working. But I mean, ideally, I think Steven Adams is going to make an impact. But at the end of the day, you really break it down, it's not going to matter in the end. I still think the Thunder could win because top down without Russ, depending on how much time he misses, they are overall better. But it's going to go 6 or 7 if it goes that way.
I think it's going to go 7, and I got the Thunder winning. Even with a healthy Russ, I think the question is, can Houston make enough three-pointers to keep everybody from helping? You know what I mean? Well, I guess this is the caveat I will say out there. If I'm the Thunder, I go into the series and I say to myself, who's the guy that I want to take 10 threes a night? Is it Harden or is it PJ Tucker?
Probably PJ Tucker. You know?
Exactly. So then I'm automatically, let's help. But this is such a weird conversation that me and you are having. I couldn't imagine an NBA coach having it with his assistants. Right? Like you're adjusting to the pre-adjustment? Like, what are we talking about? We gonna change up what we've been successful. And it's just like Harden is better at his job than all of the other guys on the floor at their job, right? We could say that.
I agree with that. I think his game really is as unstoppable as it gets, other than just being like KD or Giannis, where you're just bigger than everyone else.
Yeah.
It's tough.
I just wonder, yeah, like what the pivot in my mind is to say, okay, we know what's coming. Let's minimize it. No one guard PJ Tucker. And if PJ Tucker hit 10 threes a night, then we deserve to lose.
Right. I get that. So we'll go backwards from this one. Nuggets, Jazz. They played once already, went to 2 overtimes. Nuggets won. Bogdanovich is out for Utah. But it's a great center matchup. I mean, this is like some of the last few great bigs we have right now going head-to-head. But I still give the edge to Jokic. I think his game just overall stronger than Gobert's.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd see Nuggets in 6 probably, especially Michael Porter Jr. has been a revelation in the bubble. And the Jazz without Bogdanovich, I don't like that matchup anyway, even with Bogdanovich. Porter Jr. is going to take him down low. So I think Nuggets got this one.
Me too. I do think the Nuggets got that one. I do wonder if there's anything that the Jazz can do to speed up the game. Like I think that's their only real, you know what I mean? They don't have anybody they could throw it in the post to and say, hey, give me, but they could theoretically go really small around Gobert. Like this is a thing. Gobert isn't a center who could give you much offensively other than lobs and putbacks.
Yeah.
So it's not like when the Magic made it to the finals in 2009?
Yeah.
They had Dwight and then a bunch of guys around him who they could spread and space the floor out and just put you in a bunch of pick and rolls. And it's like Gobert can only pick and dive or pick and roll. Like he can't pick and pop. He can't do anything else. So it's not they don't really have an adjustment that they could go to on that offense. I was thinking about maybe they could go a 3-guard lineup with Clarkson and Mitchell and what's the other point guard that their starting point guard from who came this year?
Conley.
I was thinking maybe 3-guard lineup, but I just don't know what they could do to keep Denver from getting what they want. And Murray looked like himself in a couple games at the end of the bubble, and Denver just even missing Will Barton and Gary Harris Jr., they still got a damn shit ton of talent. Like, God, they got so many guys. Like a guy like Bol, like what you see flashes from him, and he kind of remind you of a poor man's KD, and it's just like, wow.
That's true. That's a good comp. I mean, he's so long and he can shoot, and it's a smooth release. Like, I mean, some people like Sean Marion was a good shooter, but his shot was so ugly, and you just know that's not going to carry him through his career. Bol is already that smooth of a shooter, that tall. I don't know. That's just fun to watch. I like that.
His ball handling, too. I don't know if you saw the game where he makes that bounce pass in the middle of the floor. So there's a game where he grabs a rebound. He's out on the break. He's at half court. and he makes like kind of like that like English bounce pass forward.
Yeah.
It bounces and comes up directly to Plumlee, who dunks it on a dead. And you got to make that pass. You gotta know you can make that pass, and he does it. And I'm just like, okay, wait a second. That's a lot for a 7 foot tall guy handling the ball in the middle of the floor to make that pass, and he drops it. So I'm just like, man, what else do they? They got Millsap. They just got a lot of talent. And then you're right. In the bubble, Michael Porter Jr., he looked like what everyone. The big talk in Chicago was, should they just take Michael Porter Jr. and stash him to his back's better?
Everyone should have done that. And we're finding that out now the hard way. But
he was the number one talent prospect in his draft year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everyone was counting him as the next guy, but he just went to Missouri and got hurt basically the first day, so didn't see it.
Yeah, so I know, and too, so many teams are just like, well, we can't afford to miss on a high draft pick, and I get that pressure from their fans, from the front office, from the coaches. I get that. But Wendell Carter Jr., his ceiling isn't going to be Tim Duncan.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Michael Porter Jr.'s ceiling, people was like, man, he kind of like a LeBron-esque sort of passer who could score. And there's like, well, I don't know if he's that good a passer, you know what I mean? But when I saw him in high school, I was like, wow, this guy could really handle the ball. He could really score. But it's just, you see him and you realize when you got that size, that's what Ben Simmons should be.
Yeah, true. And he's already there.
He's already there. And there's no reason that Ben Simmons should not have all of what Michael Porter Jr. has. So that's when you think, what could a dude who's 6'8", 6'9", who can shoot and score and rebound look like? He had a 30 in 15 games. He had 2 30-point games back-to-back, and you just realize, okay, this guy a problem.
Yeah. Well, the first game, the Nuggets, I think they had Jokic at point. It was just a funny game to watch. So, I mean, that team, they're just so versatile because they have so many skilled bigs. And I think right now the state of the league is great. I mean, we just have all these freak athletes between Jonathan Isaac, Giannis Antetokounmpo, all these guys, 6'10", with a 7'6" wingspan or whatever it is. And I guess, maybe we'd have 1 or 2 of those guys every 20 years before. Now there's, the league is full of them. Every team is 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think because too, like when we see a 7 foot tall guy, we don't automatically think box out, protect the glass, get rebounds. We think, can we put you in a corner and could you make a 3? Mm-hmm. Do you have ball handling skills? Do you feel comfortable with the ball in your hand? Like Jokic isn't some great ball handler, but he's comfortable with the ball. But his ability to pass is just amazing to watch. And the skill set of guys who are 6'9" and above in the league right now is probably the highest it's ever been.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know how that's going to pan out. I mean, especially with the threes, we're just going to have a lot of threes, a lot of big guys shooting threes, I guess. It's going to be the league in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, we're already there. I mean, we got so many. Every single center, people are like, can we add a corner 3 to his? Can he shoot a 3? Can we teach him to shoot a standstill set shot 3 just so in the event that he's wide open, maybe you can stretch the defense a little bit? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think we're already there. I mean, it just, look at Porzingis, look at all the guys who can kind of step out behind the 3-point line. It just adds a little bit something to their game.
Right. Well, speaking of Porzingis, got the Clippers and Mavs up next. I think this is the end of the Luka run this year, but the future is so bright in Dallas. But I just think the matchup for Luka and the Mavs in this game is pretty bad. I mean, they're big, but they're weak at the wings, and that is one of the Clippers' things. They have like 2 of the 3 best wing defenders in the league right now, maybe 2 of the 5 best wing defenders in the league. And Luka is just going to run right into Kawhi, and I mean, he stops everyone. I don't think anyone. I mean, offense beats good defense, but I think Kawhi is maybe like the one true exception there.
I think in this series, it reminds me of when Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan were on the Dream Team and they played Tony Kukoc. And they were pissed because Jerry Krause loved Tony Kukoc. He paid him more than Scottie, brought him over, blah, blah, blah. And those dudes went at him so viciously, and they forced him to like dribble his back to the back. Like they was just like, we're not letting you get anything. And then if you remember, like years after that, when Jeremy Lin had his whole insanity, LeBron and D Wade was like, not tonight. and they went at him just they just attacked him. They swarmed him every time he had the ball. They just were all over him. I think Kawhi and Paul George are just going to attack Luka because the shine that Luka's getting right now, the pub that he's getting, the love, this dude going to be the MVP of the league, blah, blah, blah. I think those guys care about it. I think those dudes really care about how their peers are viewed. And I think a guy like Kawhi is going to go out and try to shut him down every single time he guards him. Like, not give him any air, not give him anything. And because Luka is a step slow and he doesn't have a great post game, those are the sorts of defenders that he's just going to struggle with until he learns those parts of the game.
That's true. I mean, other than hitting a couple step backs, I really see Kawhi shutting him down, especially even Paul George, too, because Paul George is a little bit longer than Kawhi.
Yeah.
It's the worst possible matchup for Luka going into this because Porzingis, I mean, the one knock on the Clips, and it's always been who's going to guard AD. They don't have like a true big center, but Trez has done a great job. He's undersized for a center, but Porzingis doesn't play down low. It doesn't matter. I mean, you might get him down low maybe 5 touches a game, but that's not his game. So I think
it is not.
The Mavs could get swept, but I think they'll pick up 1, probably Clips in 5, honestly. And for the Mavs,
I think it'll be either 4 or 5 because one of the things that you won't get from the bubble that the bubble will keep us from getting, you lose the first 2 on the road, you go back home, you get the crowd's going crazy, you get to sleep in your own bed,
right.
Your girlfriend make you your favorite breakfast, your mom come over, you see the doorman and he tell you that he loves you. Like, that's not gonna happen. You're not gonna get that bump. It's gonna be.
It's been weird to watch, but I think the bubble, they've done a good job with the bubble presenting it, but I think, because this was a mailbag question, there's no home court advantage in this playoffs. And I mean, we kind of knew that going in. It's really we're just trying to game it so you could get your correct matchup. And if this was the Clippers' plan, I mean, they did it perfectly because they're going to shut down Luka and move on to the next round. And you have the Lakers playing against their worst possible matchup, which is either going to be Blazers or Grizzlies.
I'm gonna disagree with you on that. We can talk about it when we get there, but just to put a little bow tie on that Clippers Mavs series, yes, Luka's gonna be a thing. Like, he's gonna be a big, big, huge thing. This year, his game isn't refined enough yet to beat an elite defender and maybe 2 elite defenders who are wing guys who are known for making it tough for wing scorers. I do think Luka is going to have moments and flashes where you say, "Wow, this guy is really, really, really great still, even against his tough defense." But yes, this is the worst possible matchup for what he likes to do. He likes to handle the ball a lot, and Kawhi is just like, "You're not dribbling around me too much."
No, and then Paul George. I mean, the step down from Kawhi to Paul George is a lot, but then you're still getting maybe the 4th best perimeter defender in the league, so it's not really that much of a step down.
Exactly. You're still getting an all-defensive first-teamer.
Yeah. And I like Paul George, but I like the Dame, Beverly, Paul George beef. I mean, I'm Team Dame on that because who is Paul George to be running his mouth? Dame sent him home last year. That's a great clip. That's going to be part of Paul George's career highlight reel forever. I mean, it's going to be the low light, but.
Look, sometimes you just got to take your medicine like a man and go home. When he hit that shot last year, like, I was like, I was yelling at my team, what are you doing?
Step up, Paul George.
What are you doing? The game is on the line. This dude, they call him Logo Dame. I mean, you know what I'm saying? He will pull up Logo Lillard. They say he'll pull up from anywhere, and he just watching him, and he drops it from like 38 feet. And I'm just like looking like, what will you think? All right, so with that in mind, why the IG spice? What are we doing? What are we like? If you gonna say it like a man. Say it to his face. You right there with him in the bubble. They probably see each other every day.
There's nowhere to go. You're at the pool. You're gonna
exactly. Talk that talk. Like, look, say it with your chest, homie. Like, if you really feel y'all about that life, and I know Pat Beverly about that life. Like, Pat Beverly will say anything to anyone. He's not afraid. I do think that Paul George has neither one of those dudes honestly have earned the right to really have a lot to say. None of them wearing rings. So it's like, well, but everybody can talk trash, and I respect trash talk, especially good trash talk. But Dame clapped back so hard on him. It's like, my God, like keep running from the grind.
But it was in such like a good professional way. I mean, it's still trash talk. It was like nice, high class trash talk.
It was high. It was high. It was just like, you're not my competition because I don't think about you. You can't beef with me because I don't even think about you. Like, I don't get up in the morning thinking about Pat Beverly or Paul George. Like, I didn't send both them cats home personally. So, like, why they got anything to say? And why those dudes are talking trash to Dame Lillard, it's just you shake his hand and you say, great game. And if you Paul George, that's the type of dude you want to go at in the playoffs. You want to shut down. He got the business from jingling Joe Ingles like a couple years ago. I know playoff P should have keep it low key, baby. Don't say much. So you win, don't say a lot.
He needs to earn back the playoff P moniker. I don't even know how he really got it. I mean, back in the Pacers day, I guess, but I don't know. That's never
no one can call you playoff
and everything. I don't know.
No one can call you playoff in your name if you haven't won a title. You can't be, you know what I mean? Like, they call Tom Brady the GOAT because he's wearing rings. They call Michael Jordan the GOAT because he's wearing rings.
Right.
LeBron is in the GOAT discussion because he's wearing rings, like multiple rings. Like, they got jewelry on. So it's like, if you don't have any, man, don't playoff P. You can't really be playoff P if you don't have no championship ring, baby.
He wasn't big game James Worthy, in the Drew League. We were NCAA championship rings. I totally agree with that. You can't make up your own cool name and then without backing it up. And I don't think I love Paul George. I would take him on every team, be your best second option. But he needs to, I don't know, stay in your lane a little bit. But
stay in your lane, man. Like, let Dame shine. The man living his best life. Like, y'all could be salty, but the going on IG and posting on IG, that's just weak. That's especially when you could sit, and especially like y'all like roommates, like you like 2 doors down from him. You just, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna see him at the lazy river tomorrow. Like, just tell him then.
That's true, very true, man. So speaking of Dame, Lakers versus probably the Blazers, but the Grizzlies, if they win both elimination games, they will make it through. I think it's going at least 6, as great as Dame is right now. Touched on it a little bit earlier, the Hazonia LeBron James matchup, but I think in the end, Lakers will probably still pull it out. I mean, the more we've talked through it.
I got Lakers in 4 or 5.
Really? That's all right. That's confident. I like that.
The reason I feel like that is because, like, one old basketball axiom is if you got the best 2 players in the series, you're probably going to win. And I do think Anthony Davis is a better basketball player than Dame Lillard. 2 years ago, Anthony Davis, Pelicans swept them in the playoffs.
That's goes back to speaking about matchups. But you're right. I mean, Dame, especially at that point, Lillard solidified. They've got that team together. They haven't had a ton of turnover other than they lost Aldridge. So the chemistry-wise, they should have a pretty strong thing. And then the Pelicans, total opposite. They do not have a well-put-together team. You just got one guy coming in. You know what you got to do. Well, I shouldn't say that. Drew Holiday is pretty good. But, yeah, no, you're right. I think AD he lives on the Blazers' heads probably a little bit after that.
And I think the best compliment I could give the Lakers is they're a professional basketball team right now. Like, I know they've kind of been, like, up and down in the bubble. Because I think once they clinched the overall number 1 seed in the West, they was just like, what are we playing for? We don't want to get hurt. We want to get bench players some time and touches. We want to get Kuzma some time. We want to get Waiter some time, AC some time. But we don't really want to be out there stretching our best guys. But that Lakers team since the beginning of the year, it felt like they kind of turned a corner. After the All-Star break, they played a couple games where they just looked like they could beat anybody. So I think when the playoffs start, that team is just kind of going to go back to what they do best. A heavy dose of LeBron and AD every single time down the floor. Deion Waiters and Kuzma on that second team are going to have to just attack. Like, that's what they're paying you guys for, attack. And I think they're going to have to figure out what their best closing lineup is. Maybe some nice changes based on a matchup, but defensively, you're going to have Green, who's lost a step. KCP is going to be out there, who I think is an underrated defender at this point. I think AC is an underrated defender. So I don't think anyone on the Lakers team is going to make Dame do anything he doesn't want to do. Like, Dame is in such a good groove right now. But the rest of those dudes, they really don't scare anybody. And I know CJ's good, but no one's been like, oh, my God, we got to stop CJ McCollum tonight. Melo has been solid for them. He's been a really good acquisition. But yet again, can he do anything other than potentially score 20 points a game with LeBron? Can he make LeBron do anything? Do they have anybody to put at LeBron? And if you feel like Zach Collins and Yusuf Nurkic are the answers for AD, then I'll bet my house that he kills both of those dudes routinely. So I just don't think it's a good matchup. And the Blazers last night, I watched that whole game just to kind of see what you could tell that team really is confident in their ability to score. Gary Trent Jr., McCollum, like they just, Anthony Simmons, like they got a lot of dudes who could put the ball in the basket. The problem is who can guard? None of them are good defenders. Like not a single one, I would say.
They don't have any perimeter defense. And down low, I think between Nurkic and Whiteside, you can throw some people at them. And if I were the Blazers, I'm just going big on LeBron. And you just throw out maybe Whiteside on LeBron, and then you just live with the shot. Because his shooting numbers have been terrible so far in the bubble.
Agreed.
But, I mean, he has so many other weapons. That's not enough. But I think their best bet to just, junk up the LeBron game and just throw someone big at him. Because if you're trying to throw Hazonia or Gary Trent Jr., I mean, that's going to be pretty predictable.
Yeah. I think they'll probably start Melo or Zach Collins and then go from there. I think the problem that they're going to run into ultimately is just have enough people they can steal minutes guarding LeBron with. And him and Anthony Davis just going to get whatever they want throughout the whole series, like shots and looks and touches and assists and all that stuff. So I don't see any problems barring injury for the Lakers. But, I think Dame might have one big game maybe where that could take them over the top, but I don't see them winning more than one game.
Yeah, is a big game enough for a win? That is the question. I'm not sure. All right, so I guess we'll switch to the bubble breakout boys. I mean, my two choices are T.J. Warren, of course, but that's a little on the nose. And then instead of going Duncan Robinson, because I think people have to figure that out, because Duncan Robinson has been lighting it up from three, and I cannot say anything really bad about his game, but he is wide open every single time. I mean, someone is going to have to eventually get in his face at some point. But Tyler Hero at the point guard, I think that for the Heat has been a pretty good revelation because they traded away Winslow, who became kind of their pseudo point guard last year. And Dragic is good, but he's regressing at this point in his career for sure.
He is definitely. I think like bubble boys, like the obvious ones, like really pop out at you, like Kristaps Porzingis increased his scoring average by 11 points a game. I think Michael Porter Jr. increased his by 16.2 a game. I know the guy for the Wizards, I can't think of Roberts or whatever, he increased his scoring by double digits. So and T.J. Warren is up, I think, 11 points a game from what he was before the bubble. So those dudes are kind of like obvious, right? Gary Trent Jr. seems like he hasn't missed a shot the whole time he's shooting 67% from the 3-point line. But my real the one guy who really impressed me, Devin Booker.
Yeah, I mean,
even started
the national stage. We don't ever get to see Devin Booker,
Hey, it's funny you brought that up, man. They were interviewing one of the Suns players last night, and he was like, "We only had one nationally televised game the entire year."
Mm-hmm.
And
what
so
he was against?
Exactly, probably the Lakers. But it's just like it's just one of those things you realize, like that team or that guy is really good. Booker is, as a two guard, as a primary scorer, he is phenomenal. His ability to shoot from deep, he's a really good ball handler. He can get into the lane against basically any defender, and he's just solid all the way around. He gonna have to put it all together though. But I think in the bubble, man, I was like really, really impressed with just, I don't know, his maturity and composure on the offensive end. Like they asked him to be the primary scorer, and he did it smoothly and efficiently every single night for a team that you kind of know what's coming from that team, and he still looked really, really good.
Yeah, I think he was caught in a position where they needed him to do more than he was probably ready for at the time. Not that he wasn't capable of going out there and being your ball handler and number one scoring option, but adding Rubio to him, you don't have to bring the ball up. You can do more off-ball things. I think that's helped his game so much. And getting Monty Williams as a coach, I mean, Monty Williams is a good coach. And this is proven that without anything.
Agreed. And I do think, like, yes, one of the things that, like you said, so many things go into a narrative. but having Ricky Rubio be a point guard. Ricky Rubio is a point guard through and through. He's going to make good decisions 9 out of 10 times. He's going to get guys looks in spots that, you know, he's going to keep the ball moving. He's not going to just dribble with no purpose. Like, he runs the offense. And I think taking just a little bit of that responsibility off Devin Booker's plate, you kind of got to see that this Suns team got some pieces. They're an interesting team. They could probably win some games. You know, Saric, they didn't have Kelly Oubre, but, you know, you think about just their pieces and how they play. It could be possibly a fight to get in the playoffs next year. The West is so tough, so at the bottom, you know, they're going to be fighting.
And their owner doesn't seem like he wants to pay anyone or go above the salary cap. So, but I think they finally, yeah.
It's been a knock on Sarver from the time he owned the team, man. He traded T.J. Warren this year for cash considerations.
Right. Literally a bag of beans almost.
A bag of beans, a fresh bag of beans. So, yeah, I think the bubble, the bubble talent, well, you know what, just too, I was thinking about the bubble when we were talking earlier. I hope, maybe I'm the only person who feels this, I'm sure other basketball fans have to feel this way. I would love if they could incorporate the bubble into the regular season going forward.
Really? How so? How would you want to see it?
So let's say the last 14, 15 games of the year are played in a bubble every year. Right? We get to 68, right? We have the All-Star break. We play to 68. The last 14 games, we bring everybody to Orlando every year, and we have like this kind of what we're seeing right now, where they have games all through the day, no travel. It's just for 2 weeks out of every year, we put them all together and they play and we have like the bubble awards, and then we determine the bottom 2 seeds in each conference through the bubble.
Okay. I mean, I like that idea overall. The reason the owners, I mean, it's just money. You don't want to give up your home games. You only have so many home games per year. You don't want to lose the ticket revenue. But I think that for the playoffs, maybe like a preseason tournament or the in-season tournament / all-star game kind of thing people have been talking about, I think that would work perfectly for that. But I just don't think you could ever get the owners, especially after taking it on the nose like they are this year, to take less games. Unless it's a safety thing. I mean, that is another thing. I mean, we may see the bubble next season at a necessity.
Yes. So that is true. I think the thing that you know, I don't want to speak from like, oh, I know this definitively, but I think the thing that kills the players in the NBA is the grind between the games, right? Getting from Thursday night's game to Sunday afternoon's game is what kills them, because they in 3 cities in 3 nights. They get in. So I think like recovery and health and all of those things, I just think having this amount of basketball in one place has just been like a revelation. And if you just think if we had the fans, you'd be going, what would we pay to go to Orlando and spend 10 hours watching basketball one Saturday? You know what I mean? You could leave and come back. You could buy an all-day pass, watch your favorite games out of that pass, and then, you know, just go to Disney the rest of the day, or in between games, the early games, you know, go see an early game, go to the park, then come back to a late game.
No, that's a great idea. Especially if you put it like that and you flesh it out a little bit more. There's a lot to like about it. I like that idea.
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
No, of course, man. Of course. So then we did the Instagram girls. I mean, what do you think about like the conjugal visits? They're finally letting people, oh, there's an Amber Alert.
So I want to say, I don't want to be like pouring, you know, water on the fire, but I do think this was brought up mainly by the family guys.
That makes sense. There's probably more people that want to be with their family than just some random IG model. We hope.
Exactly. But let's not discount the random IG models. Like that's a beautiful thing too. You know what I mean? Like I'm not hating on any of them dudes and any of them young ladies or anybody who wants to be invited to the bubble. But I think the big push for this, it's got to be the family guys, right? Like if you Chris Paul and you the president of the Players Association, what's having power if you can't use it to see your family? You know what I mean? He got kids, he got a wife, LeBron got 3 kids. Like it's just like, well, I want to, and we're gonna be here for months. You know what I mean? They've already been there for a couple of weeks, and now the playoffs start. They're gonna be there for probably what, 2 more months?
Yeah, I mean the playoffs take a while. I mean, I think the turnaround between games they can do. They're never going to go back to back in the playoffs, but
No, they're not gonna go back to back.
Yeah,
Every other day, probably towards the end, but with no travel, who knows? I mean, it might be every other. You know what I mean? So, I do think it's like it's tentative because I know the NBA is like, okay, we want to make everybody happy, but how you do that is probably the tricky part. And you already know people lying. Like you saw the Seahawks player got caught sneaking a girl into the hotel, and she was like dressed as a player, and they cut him. So you already know dude is scheming on how to get they side and their baby mama and the girl they just met on Tinder and the girl they just met on Snap. They're trying to get them all in the spot, and the NBA's like, nah, it can't be. You know, I think they initially ruled out anybody you met through an intermediary, no agents, no people you met through social media. So it's got to be like close personal friends. You got to be able to prove and establish that you guys have close friendships. So like, oh, there's a picture of me and this person from 10 years ago at high school. You know what I mean? Like it's got to be able to.
Yeah, but then you get into the whole of how are you going to prove a lot of these things? I mean, I totally agree with it. I think the NBA, I'm behind almost everything they've done. Really everything they've done, honestly. I don't have anything I'm against per se. Yeah. But how are they really going to prove how long you've known this girl and all this? And it just opens up this can of worms of like, I guess they just have to run background checks on everyone that comes in the bubble, which they probably already are doing. So.
Oh, so I think yes, I think all the infrastructure is there for them to keep. They're going to just use this all as a way to say, oh, well, we couldn't establish that you guys have been friends for more than 6 years. She can't come or he can't come. You know what I mean? Like family and all of that stuff is going to be easy. Like, this is my mom. You know, she always been my mom, but this is my wife. You know, we've been married for blah, blah, blah. This is my long-term girlfriend. I just think they are saying, like, we want you guys to feel like you're at home, but also, too, we got to take all the safety precautions serious because the players, they're smart and they're thoughtful guys, but I don't know if they take their own safety and security as seriously as the league does, because this is something me and you kind of touched on early. The NBA, once the NBA has its own infectious disease people, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Once coronavirus started to become a thing, the league shut it down. Like they was like, no, the individual players matter so much to the league. I would say they matter more to NBA than any other sports franchise in the world.
That's true. NBA shut down long before the US did. I mean, you could say we never really shut down. So exactly. Leadership matters.
Exactly. They shut down immediately, right? So I think the league's whole stance on this is we're going to take the safest, slowest, most cautionary position that you could take and see what happens going forward. But yeah, I think it's smart because you got to get the families in there. But I ain't really tripping if they can't get some IG hotties in there. Like that's just.
I think it's just a good story. It gets its run for a couple days, and you know we're in the run right now.
I love it for that part. I love it as just part of the news cycle that lasts for 24 to 48 hours. Where it's just like, oh, Instagram baddie's gonna be in the spot. You're gonna see people take pictures with them, but nah, the league on. You already know that those guys not gonna take no chances.
No, I think NBA has done it as well as you can. They've taken it as seriously as anyone should. And I think the bubble's probably safer than where anyone else is right now. I mean, heck, I'd rather be in the bubble if I was LeBron's fan. I mean, they obviously, you got so much other – they don't probably go to the store, but –
Yeah. But you are right. The NBA is – and this is the thing, like, this is tough. This is why this topic is so sensitive for so many people. If you just divorce COVID-19 from the political reality and just treat it only as a science matter, only as a public safety and health issue, only, like, right, not the politics of it. If you just treat it like that, the league did what every entity in the world should have done.
Yeah, 100%.
We're going to make our people financially solvent and sound, check, but we're also going to shut them down, lock them down, and keep them away from each other, because we know if we tell them they can see each other, they're going to see each other.
Right.
So, and they did it so early and so stridently at the beginning that they saved themselves all the headache at the back end. So when they brought people to the bubble, it wasn't like 78 players have tested positive for COVID-19. It was just like, okay. And then they said to all of the people who still did not feel comfortable, you will still get paid and you don't have to come. You don't want to be here. If you're afraid that you might contract it here, you can stay away and you'll still, Avery Bradley was there. I don't feel safe. And then he was boom. So, they just handled it in a professional manner because they have so much at stake, but we all have so much at stake. So I just wish everyone would have took it the way they took it and handled the response so quickly and so effectively. I'm not making a political statement. I'm making a health and safety statement that the NBA know they couldn't risk losing one of their superstars to COVID-19, so they just shut it down.
I agree 100%. And they really, they could have had a potential PR nightmare. The Rudy Gobert video, everything right at the beginning, that could have played out a million different ways. And I think just because it's played out so badly in America that's like, the least of our concerns. That was such a small percentage of anything that ever happened. So that got swept away, but oh man, that was a potential PR nightmare, and they got to avoid that. But then to compare them, I was talking to my friend who's an employee for the Dolphins, and he's in the ticketing things, like membership, season tickets. They plan on having games. They plan on having fans in the games in Miami right now, which is, global epicenter. DeSantis has not come out and said anything else. Like the Giants and Jets, governor of New Jersey, because they both share that stadium, they've already said no people in the game. So that's it. You can't do anything. But Cowboys, the Florida teams, they're going to try to put fans in these games, and we'll see how that goes. And then there's just not the commissioner. It's just not as strong. Roger Goodell is a clown compared to Adam Silver, truthfully. And just how there's all these different ways and how baseball's mishandled it. And it's different. There's so many more people in baseball in the NFL. I don't know if you could bubble them up, but at least trying to find a better solution than just, going as is with minimal changes instead of, trying to actually figure out a better way to do it, which I think the NBA is doing a better job than sometimes the basketball. It's better. You don't have all the scrub teams. There's a lot to like about the bubble.
Agreed. Everything you said, I agree with 100%. I think whenever something dramatic that affects everyone happens, like, there's something cliche, but people say it, and it really does, it means a lot if you think about it. Thinking outside the box. But, I guess maybe going forward, we'll say thinking inside the bubble. Like, if I was the commissioner of baseball has the infrastructure to do exactly what people want them to do, play it in a bubble. They could have went to Arizona, or, I wouldn't have come to Florida just because the numbers in Florida are exploding. But I would have went to Arizona where the Cactus League is at.
They got spring training, all those stadiums.
And then we just play 2 or 3 games a day in each one of those stadiums, round robin style, until every team plays 50 games. And then we start the playoffs.
And there would be a sense of at least some home field. Depending on, it's only in-state travel, which is still somewhat risky, but you would have a sense of home field. It's their stadiums, their facilities. They know it. That they have homes there. There's already, every team has a spring training site. It's part of the deal. So that is such a better idea than the NFL. The South, between the Florida teams, Dallas, New Orleans, Atlanta, like you could easily make these regional pockets, which is Absolutely. So much safer. Just, nothing is 100% safe right now.
Nope.
But there's better ways to do it than just, blindly moving forward.
So Northeast, South, Midwest, Southwest, and then West are the bubble regions for the NFL, right? And then all of those teams just play. So you just do a realignment. That's it.
Yeah.
You cut the country into 4 or 5 different sections, and then each one of those teams, they play each team twice. The team that has the best record comes out of the 2 teams with the best records. I don't know, maybe they play each other 3 times. I don't know. Whatever you want to do. I do know that reducing travel, limiting people's exposure outside of the situation, all of those things are things that the CDC recommends, right? So if there's no way to do football safely, then we just don't have football. And I think that's what college football is coming to the realization that we can't do this safely, right?
Yeah, they're so disjointed. It's hard enough to get 32 billionaires to make a solid decision let alone 120 presidents trying to make their best decision for a college. I mean, I never thought the college football season was going to work out. I'm disappointed that it's not, but you couldn't get that many people together because the levels of funding compared to the SEC versus just even, Pac-12 or lower Power 5 schools, there's such a big gap. And to do the testing, do it efficiently, it's kind of like exactly like you said, if you can't do it right, you might as well just pack it in for the year. And I'd rather them do that than putting people at risk, communities at risk, and the like. All right, so for the last segment here, oh, can you hear me?
I did, but you kind of paused for a second.
Okay, yeah, cut out a little bit. I'll have to edit that last part out. I kind of lost myself there. But last segment, I'm going to kind of let you ISO this, set a couple picks. What do you think about the league's Black Lives Matter stance? Do you think they should have played? Do you like the names on the jerseys? Your thoughts. I mean, and also, do you think it's taking away from the movements and protests that were already going on by, kind of distracting people? Or is it more positive than negative?
I think it's more positive than negative. And I thought about this a lot since they started playing. I do understand the sentiment that people were like, we shouldn't play at all, so we can keep all the attention focused squarely on the movement, as some people kind of call it. I agree that the players could do whatever they thought was best. But one of the things that's always been true in America is that you can do two things at the same time, right? You can make a lot of money as a professional sports league, and you can also have a social stance, right? So I feel like more companies need to understand that dynamic and go, okay, we know our customer base. We know our fan base. We know who buys our products. We know who, and so there's companies who are like clearly aren't going to take a stand with Black Lives Matter, but the NBA knows who is digesting basketball. They know that it's people that, if you watch basketball, you routinely are seeing and hearing from African-American millionaires, and they all have social platforms. Not all, but most. Like I'll use LeBron because he's one of my favorite examples. He built a school.
Yes.
So you knew he was going to have a lot to say about Black Lives Matter. I think putting it on the jersey is just more of you guys, not necessarily for Black people necessarily. I think the thing for Black Lives Matter going forward is that other races need to understand what is being asked for, what is being suggested, what is being the narrative behind why all these things matter. Like, what does this mean? Like on Dame's jersey, I think it says no, how many more? So like, this is an opportunity for you to have dialogue about why these players feel this way, why these players are willing to do what they're doing, why they're standing up. Like, I think very early on, one of the things I saw with Tobias Harris was he was like, look, I'm only going to talk about Breonna Taylor because that's the only thing I care about. Like, I'm not going to talk about anything else. And I think the players taking that stance and having a platform and using it is very powerful. So I've been really for it. There's always going to be gaps. There's always going to be, we could have done this better. But I do think the NBA is really trying to say, how can we use our platform to lift and encourage people to understand what Black Lives Matter means, what the movement as a whole means, and why the players feel so strongly about it. And it's like, well, if you root for James Harden, or if you root for LeBron James, or if you root for Jimmy Butler, what is the message that these guys are trying to send? Because they are humans first and foremost. They are Black men first and foremost before they're basketball players. So I think the league has done a really good job of creating a platform and allowing the narrative to just kind of take its natural course.
Well, that's good to hear. I don't want to speak on it too much because obviously it is something that affects my life, but I will never truly understand the perspective coming from, Black people in America. I'm just a, white guy. So I wanted to give you the chance, give you the platform here. It's a small platform, but I think I looked it up and it's something like only 10% or less of podcasters have like any diversity really. So just these small steps and all these things matter. It's small, but they all add up, and I'm glad to have you on and get your piece out.
Thank you. I appreciate that too. I think, one of the things that has come up, I'll say this. I used to listen to Bill Simmons' podcast, and I stopped listening to it. Because if you tell me you support diversity and you don't actually do anything for diversity, then what are you supporting? Just the narrative, just how it sounds?
Yeah, a lot of companies are getting caught saying things and then immediately going back. I mean, you and I both are employed by Trader Joe's, and they had the slight thing about the racist packaging, Trader Ming's, Trader Jose's, Arabian Joe's, and there's just different levels. And I think Trader Joe's immediately backtracking does not look good versus like, just going forward with what had already been put out to the public and trying to.
Agree. But this is the thing. So if whatever stance, whatever position you take, do the research to get there. Ask the people who are involved, right? And if you get one person who says, yes, I find that offensive, then you should have a long conversation about, is this the right step for us? You know what I mean? Like, so all of us have a platform in some way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm. So not addressing what you feel is, I don't want to say disrespectful necessarily, but what do you feel is maybe tone deaf or insensitive?
I think it's disingenuous would be the biggest thing. How could you come out and say, yeah, we're totally against this, and then 3 days later, because maybe you had a minor pushback from 10% of your customers, you're going to completely change face now, and you lost that first base you maybe built up just to keep this very small sliver. And plus, just anyone that you can't, if you're wishy-washy, everyone sees through that. I mean, you got to make your choice here and move forward. I think where people are losing me, you can't, it's similar to what the president does all the time. You say something one day, then 3 days later, something else. And how are you supposed to, and I can't believe either thing now. That's my problem with it.
I agree with you on that too. I think what we are watching in real time is that we're questioning people's sincerity and their motives, right? So if you come and tell me, I don't know how we get to a better place, but I'm willing to work and have dialogue about how we get there, that's all anyone's asking. You know what I mean? Like the fake wokeness or the stuff that no one asked for, like, over the course of the last couple of months, we saw a ton of like voice actors be like, well, I'm not voicing any African-American characters anymore. And it's just like, well, that's not what we asking for. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to try to speak for all Black people, but no one said, man, we got to get less white people doing Black voices on cartoon shows. Like that doesn't move the needle for any of us. But like having a dialogue about the Washington football team's name changing, that's something that's near and dear to a lot of people's heart because they feel like that's disrespectful. So just having those sorts of meaningful conversations that may lead to a change, or maybe it doesn't lead to a change, but let's have a conversation. Let's create a dialogue. Let's not be afraid of where that dialogue takes us, right?
Absolutely.
Like, hey, and I think that's what the NBA has done, like just a fantastic job. And that's why, I don't think me and you ever really talked about this, but I've talked about this with a bunch of people before. The Colin Kaepernick situation only happens in the NFL. Because I think maybe baseball, but definitely the NFL, because the NFL has wrapped itself in patriotism, and at times it looks more like nationalism than patriotism. And because there is an adversarial relationship between management and players, especially some Black players feel as though that football represents sort of a plantation mentality, that there's no dialogue. So that would never happen in the NBA because the players drive the league in the NBA, not the teams. The teams drive the league in football. So have that conversation with Colin Kaepernick the minute he starts kneeling and say, what's your platform? How can we support your platform? How can you educate us on your platform so we can speak eloquently about what you're trying to do? How can we use our resources to put pressure? But you see the difference. You see the NBA say, yeah, we're rich. We're a bunch of primarily owned by white billionaires too. But we understand who our viewers are and we understand who drives our league. So we're going to have a partnership with those entities. Whether we believe all of it or agree with all of it or not, we will give you the platform to do what you need to do and we'll amplify your voices.
Okay. I really like to see overall, I mean, is there anything else you would like to see the NBA do, or do you think they're basically doing as much as they can?
I think right now they're doing a ton. I know they have like some sort of fund that I was listening to somebody talk about, and that's the first I heard of it. I need to do more research on it. I do think the NBA needs to partner with the players, and instead of 30 guys having 30 charities, get a little more direction in, I will use this, and I'm comfortable saying this as an example. LeBron James could be the blueprint for a lot of other basketball players, right? So if you're telling me that he put pressure on Nike to help him open a school, then where's the James Harden Foundation, or where's the James Harden School in Houston, for lower income families in historically black neighborhoods? Where's the Dame Lillard School? Where's the, put pressure on these advertising partners to help in these at-risk communities. That's a step that, that's something that you could walk out and say, hey, we built a school, we funded that school. We partner with Adidas, they provide this. We partner with Reebok, they do this. We partner with Coke, they do that. We partner with McDonald's, they do that. So like transparency, and then what's the next step? You know what I mean? Like more black owners for a league that's like, I think 78% black. So like, just show me what the future looks like in the NBA. And show me what the future looks like in your partners. You know what I mean? Like if you guys partner with McDonald's, put pressure on McDonald's to take a stance.
Right. I mean, everyone has a platform. And I think even just people listening to this right now, even if you only have, 5 followers on your Insta or Twitter, you still have 5 followers, and you can grow that the more you make content and post. So use your platform. It doesn't matter how big you think it is. Everyone has a voice right now, and especially with social media, you can make anything and get it out there. So please be active, whatever you believe in, get behind it and actually do something about it. And I think that's what we need to do, especially going forward. November, we got to vote. We need to become more activated. Vote, everyone.
Vote. I know it might be hard. I know some people are going to hear this and be like, man, I got to stand in line for hours at my local voting place. Find out what your mail by vote looks like when you in the last day to send that in. Find out, there's so many things that have been said over the last 24 hours about not funding the post office. Mm-hmm. So what can we do? Buy stamps. I know none of these are great options, but the upcoming election, all the elections from here on out for the rest of your life matter so much. Senators, mayors, aldermen, alderwomen, alder people, vote. That's one of the things, like I know a lot of players had that on their jerseys, but that's something that's really near and dear to my heart. It's something I talk a lot about on social media. Like, make sure you register, vote, and please go vote.
Yes, please vote, everyone. And even in we're both in Florida right now. You can get your mail-in ballot, fill it out at home, and then drop it off at your polling place in case you are worried about it getting lost in the mail. You don't want to stand in line. There are options. Just please look into them. Educate yourself on the candidates and everything they stand for, and just please vote. I mean, we don't all have to agree, but if everyone votes, that is a good thing, and that just brings the country further ahead.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, thank you so much for having you on, man. This has been a great interview. Have you on again soon when we get a little deeper into the playoffs. Do you have anything you want to promote?
Nah, just being cool. Just
being
that's
a cool guy. Black Lives Matter. Please arrest Brown murderers.
Yeah, hit me up on Twitter if you like basketball talk. My Twitter is at Brian Brian Mikell Mikell 1. So yeah, hit me up if you like shoes and fun discourse about all kinds of stuff. So yeah, hit me up.
Oh yeah, what's one quick question? What's been your best the best shoe you've gotten during pandemic?
Oh man, that's a good one. The best shoe I got, I got the Space Hippies that dropped, but I sold those pretty quickly. I liked them, but I just wasn't feeling them. Mm-hmm. I picked up a bunch of Kobe's.
Oh, really?
Probably about 30 pairs of Kobe's. Nice. Since the time he died till a couple days back. Just like maybe more than 30 pairs. Probably like maybe 38 pairs of Kobe's.
Wow. R.I.P. Kobe.
Yeah, R.I.P. Kobe. So yeah, just a lot of shoes, but it's been like it's getting ridiculous. It really is.
Oh yeah. The freshest Trader Joe's mate you'll ever encounter. Brian, thank you so much, man. Have a good day, brother. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Jack.
See you, man.